I never thought a simple walk in the forest would change everything, but that day, it wasn't just the trees watching me, it was him. Before I tell you what happened next, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. You won't believe how it all ended. My name is Emily, I'm 36, and I often go out to clear my head in the woods near our village. The air there is different, fresh, free, and it feels like no one can judge you, no one can tell you what to do. But that day I heard the crunch of branches behind me. I turned and saw him, the forester, tall, strong, with sharp eyes that seemed to know every secret of the forest and, suddenly, every secret of mine too. He looked at me not as a stranger but as if he had been waiting. His voice was low when he said, "You shouldn't be here alone," and the way he stepped closer made me feel not just guilty, but caught, like I had broken some unspoken rule. I tried to smile, to make it seem innocent, but my heart was pounding, and when he added, "There are ways to teach a lesson to those who wander where they shouldn't," I felt a shiver run through me. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but something hotter, heavier, a warning and a promise all at once. I swallowed hard, pretending to be calm, though every step he made toward me made my breath shorter. The forest seemed suddenly quiet, as if even the birds were waiting for what he'd do. His hand brushed against a branch and snapped it with ease, showing his strength without a word. Then he leaned close enough that I could smell the scent of pine and smoke on him. "You think this forest is just for walking?" he asked, and I shook my head, unable to answer properly. "It belongs to those who know how to respect it, and you'll have to learn respect too." His tone was firm, but his eyes, they burned with something else, something that made my knees weak. I tried to step back, but he caught my wrist gently yet firmly, not hurting, just holding me in place. "Running won't save you," he murmured, and there was a strange softness in his words, a dangerous tenderness. My lips parted as if to protest, but no sound came, only the rush of blood in my ears, and when his other hand brushed against my shoulder, slow, deliberate, I realized the punishment he had in mind was nothing like I had feared. It was something my body craved even before my mind could admit it. His fingers traced down my arm with a steady patience, making my skin tingle as if the forest itself had come alive around us. I felt trapped between the rough bark of the tree behind me and the weight of his presence in front. My breath caught when he tilted his head, his voice dropping lower. "You came here without asking. So now you'll stay until I decide you've learned." The way he said it was not cruel, it was steady, unshakable, leaving no space for refusal. His thumb brushed my wrist in slow circles, a gesture so gentle it contradicted the firmness of his tone. I shivered, torn between the instinct to resist and the strange warmth building inside me. His gaze locked on mine, and when he leaned just close enough that his lips almost touched my ear, he whispered, "The forest takes what it wants, and today, so do I." The words sent a rush through me so strong I could barely breathe, my body betraying me as I stayed still, waiting, not daring to break the spell he had cast. His hand pressed lightly against my hip, not forcing, just holding me there as if reminding me I wasn't going anywhere. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, my heart beating so fast I thought he could hear it. He moved closer, his breath warm against my neck, and the contrast of his calm control with the wildness of the forest around us made everything sharper. "You wanted freedom," he murmured, his lips brushing so close I trembled. "But freedom always comes with a price." I closed my eyes, every sound of the woods fading into silence except for his steady breathing, the weight of his presence, the way his rough palm slid slowly up my side, deliberate, unhurried, and yet leaving me burning with expectation. I realized then it wasn't the forest that held me captive, it was him, and I didn't know if I ever wanted to escape. His fingers traced the line of my arm so lightly that goosebumps rose instantly, and I shivered not from the chill but from the way he touched me as though he already knew every secret I kept hidden. He leaned in closer, his lips brushing against the shell of my ear, his voice low and steady. "Out here, no one tells me what to do, and now, no one tells you either, except me." The words sank deep, stirring something inside me I didn't dare name. His grip tightened just enough to make me feel the strength beneath the calm, as if he could command the entire forest and me with it. I breathed in sharply, my body answering before my mind had time to resist, and when his rough hand slid slowly down my waist and held me firm against him, I understood that the punishment he spoke of wasn't cruelty. It was the kind that made my knees weak and my thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind. His lips finally found mine, not in a rush but in a slow, deliberate way that made my heart pound louder than the rustling trees around us. The kiss carried a weight, a command, yet a strange tenderness that left me trembling. He pulled back just slightly, his forehead pressing to mine as his thumb stroked along my cheek. "You wandered into my woods," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. "So now you answer to me." I couldn't speak, my chest rising and falling too quickly, my body caught between wanting to flee and craving more of him. His hand slid lower to the small of my back, pressing me even closer, his scent, wood smoke, earth, and something purely male, wrapped around me until I felt swallowed by him. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting, as he tilted my chin up again and whispered, "You'll remember this every time you step into these trees, won't you?" I nodded before I even realized it, my lips parting on a shaky breath as his eyes burned into mine. There was no escaping that gaze, it pinned me in place like sunlight through branches. His fingers traced down my arm, slow and rough from work, until they caught my wrist and lifted my hand to his chest. The steady thrum of his heartbeat under my palm made me shiver. He leaned closer, his voice low and edged with something that made my knees weak. "Good girl, now you belong to the forest as much as to me." The words curled around me like ivy, binding me tighter. When his mouth brushed along my jaw, I closed my eyes, letting the heat of him drown out every thought. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only him, the strength in his grip, and the promise in his breath against my skin. His lips found mine before I could even catch another breath, firm and demanding yet laced with a tenderness that sent a rush of fire through me. My body yielded without hesitation, the rough bark at my back grounding me as his hands explored with unhurried certainty, each touch a command, each pause a reminder that I was no longer in control. His voice broke between kisses, deep and husky. "The forest punishes, but it also claims," and I felt every word sinking into me, branding me. I clutched at his shirt, desperate and trembling, and when he finally pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, the weight of his gaze made me feel both fragile and untouchable, like I was his secret carved into the wild silence of the woods. He lifted me as if I weighed nothing, turning so the soft moss beneath the trees became my bed. Sunlight broke through the branches, scattering golden patches across my skin. His breath was hot against my neck as he whispered that the forest had no mercy for wanderers, and yet in his arms I felt not punishment but a strange safety. My pulse quickened when his fingers brushed my jaw, tracing down with deliberate slowness, every movement pulling me deeper into a haze where fear and desire tangled. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the rhythm of his touch, the steady strength of his body hovering over mine, and in that stillness of the woods, all I could hear was his heart beating heavy against mine. His lips brushed my ear, his voice low, commanding yet tender, telling me I shouldn't have strayed so far, that the forest punished disobedience, but his hands spoke a different truth. Firm yet careful as they slid along my sides, tracing the curve of my waist, his warmth seeping into me, his chest pressing down just enough to remind me of his strength. Every word he spoke felt like both warning and promise, and when his gaze locked with mine, I saw fire there, not anger but something deeper, something that made my breath catch. I clung to his shirt as if the world beyond the trees no longer mattered, and in that moment I wasn't afraid of his judgment, I was afraid of how much I wanted to be kept there, under his watch, under his rule. He tilted my chin upward, forcing my eyes to meet his, and in that heavy silence I felt as though he was reading every secret I'd ever tried to hide. His thumb brushed slowly across my lips, lingering just long enough to make me shiver, and then he whispered that in his forest nothing happened without his consent, that every path, every tree, every breath of wind belonged to him, and by wandering alone I had already surrendered. myself to his law. My heart pounded as he leaned closer, his breath mixing with mine, and though part of me wanted to protest, to claim my freedom, the deeper part craved the safety and control he radiated, his presence overwhelming yet intoxicating, until the only thought left in my mind was that maybe I had come here not by accident but because I wanted exactly this. His hand slid to the back of my neck, firm yet strangely tender, and the warmth of his palm spread through me like fire as he pulled me just close enough for my body to melt into his shadow. I could smell the earth and pine on him, raw and unyielding, and every heartbeat told me I was caught, claimed, unable to escape even if I wanted. He murmured that the forest demanded obedience, that straying too far meant paying a price, and though his words were stern, his tone wrapped around me like velvet, leaving me trembling between fear and desire. My lips parted but no sound came, only a quiet gasp as his nearness stripped away every thought until all I could do was surrender to the wild rhythm of his presence. His breath brushed against my ear as he whispered that I had tempted the forest too long, that my wandering steps had stirred something dangerous. Yet instead of scolding me harshly, he drew me tighter against him, my chest rising fast against the strength of his frame, and I felt his words melt into my skin like a brand, soft but unbreakable. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but the way his thumb traced along my jaw silenced me, his eyes catching mine with a depth that left me weightless, and in that moment the trees around us seemed to close in, the world fading until there was only his grip, his command, and the shiver running through me as he claimed the right to guide me back, step by step, deeper into the wild that suddenly felt like his domain and my surrender. Every branch snapped under our feet as if echoing my racing heart, his hand never loosening from mine, pulling me forward with a certainty that both frightened and thrilled me. The deeper we went, the more I felt his presence wrapping around me like the forest itself, his voice low and steady, telling me I should have known better, that a woman alone among these shadows invites danger. Yet the danger I felt was not from wolves or night but from the fire in his gaze. When he stopped beneath an old oak and turned me sharply toward him, my back pressing against the rough bark, I gasped, but the sound was swallowed by the closeness of his lips, hovering just enough to make me ache, his palm firm at my waist as if daring me to resist, though my body betrayed me, leaning into his strength as if I had been waiting for this moment since the first time I stepped into these woods. His breath brushed against my cheek, warm and steady, and though I knew I should turn away, every part of me longed to stay right there pinned between him and the tree. The rough bark biting into my back only made me feel his closeness sharper, more real. His eyes searched mine as if he was reading every hidden thought I tried to bury, his thumb grazing along my jawline so lightly it sent shivers racing down my skin. "You knew you weren't supposed to wander here alone," he whispered, his tone half warning, half something darker, and I felt my lips part as if to argue, but no words came, only a trembling breath that betrayed me. He leaned closer, not yet claiming, just holding me in the tension of what might happen. And in that moment the silence of the forest wrapped around us, broken only by my pounding heart that seemed loud enough for him to hear. His hand slid lower, firm yet careful, resting on my waist as if testing how much I would allow. My pulse throbbed against the stillness of the woods, every sound magnified, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, but all I could focus on was the heat of him pressing closer, his body caging mine against the tree, his breath brushing over my lips without touching, making me ache with the weight of anticipation. "Do you understand why I can't let this go?" he murmured, his voice low and rough, each word sinking into me like a command and a plea at once, and I felt myself nod before I even realized it. Surrendering to a gravity that pulled me entirely into his orbit, his lips finally brushed mine, not hurried, not rough, but with that restrained hunger that made my knees weak, as though he had been holding back for far too long. The taste of him was warm, smoky, like fire and pine, and when his hand slid up the curve of my back, drawing me closer, I forgot where the forest ended and where I began. The world narrowed to the rhythm of his breathing, the steady beat of his heart against my chest. and the unspoken promise in the way he held me, as if he wouldn't just punish me for wandering too deep, but claim me entirely in a way I couldn't resist. He pulled back just enough for his breath to graze my cheek, his voice low and deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here alone," and though the words sounded like a warning, his hand still lingered on my waist, his thumb tracing lazy circles that set every nerve on fire. My answer caught in my throat, half a protest, half a plea, but before I could speak he tilted my chin up, his eyes burning into mine, the forest around us silent as if it too was holding its breath. And when his lips found mine again, deeper this time, I knew that whatever punishment he meant, it would be one I would crave until he decided I had learned my lesson. His mouth moved with a firm certainty that made my knees weak, and when he pressed me back against the rough bark of the tree, I gasped, not from the bite of the wood but from the way his body closed in on mine, leaving me no room to escape even if I wanted to. His voice came again, almost a growl, "Out here you belong to me," the words both terrifying and intoxicating, his hands sliding lower, holding me in place as if the forest itself had given him the right. And though a part of me knew I should resist, the stronger part melted under the heat of his touch, aching for more of the punishment he promised. He didn't give me space to think. His lips claimed mine with a hunger that stole my breath, and his hand tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his burning gaze. The forest around us seemed to fade. The only sound was my heartbeat hammering in my chest and the rasp of his breath against my skin. When his fingers traced down my neck, slow but unrelenting, I shivered, trapped between the cold bark and the fire of his body. He whispered low, "You disobeyed, and now you'll learn," the words dripping with authority, and instead of fear I felt my body tremble with anticipation, my pulse begging for the punishment I secretly craved. His hand slid down my waist, rough and deliberate, holding me in place as though the forest itself had conspired to keep me there. His voice wrapped around me like smoke, low and dangerous. "Every step you took deeper into these woods without permission." He paused, his thumb brushing the edge of my hip, making me gasp, "is mine to take back from you." My breath caught, tangled between resistance and surrender. My fingers gripped the bark behind me, splinters digging into my skin, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away from the storm in his eyes. And when he leaned closer, lips grazing the shell of my ear, he murmured, "You wanted to test me, didn't you?" Sending a shiver all the way down my spine. I tried to whisper something, maybe a protest, maybe a plea, but the words tangled on my tongue. His scent of pine and earth filled my lungs, heavy, overwhelming, and when his hand tilted my chin upward, forcing me to meet his gaze, I saw the unspoken verdict there, wild and absolute. "Then take your punishment," he breathed, and the command in his tone left no space for doubt. My knees felt weak, my pulse pounding so loud I was certain the trees could hear it, yet my body leaned into his touch, betraying me, craving the fire he promised in that single sentence. His rough palm slid slowly down my arm, leaving behind a trail of heat that made me shiver even though the air was still. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me, every rustle quiet, every bird silenced, only the sound of my heartbeat crashing in my ears. His lips brushed dangerously close to mine, not quite touching, but close enough that I felt the warmth of his breath. "Do you understand now why you shouldn't wander off alone?" he murmured, and I couldn't answer. My mouth parted but no sound came. His nearness was the only truth, his presence the only law, and in that suspended moment it felt like the forest itself had crowned him judge and me the willing culprit. His voice sank even lower, almost a growl, as his fingers tilted my chin upward, forcing me to meet his gaze, those dark eyes reflecting both warning and desire. "Out here, rules are mine," he whispered, and the words seemed to bind me tighter than any rope. I could feel the strength in his arm as it wrapped slowly around my waist, drawing me closer until my body was pressed against the hard wall of his chest. My breath caught, a soft gasp escaping before I could stop it. The rough fabric of his shirt brushed my skin and every nerve burned with awareness. His lips hovered above mine just long enough to make me ache before grazing them in the faintest touch, a punishment so sweet it felt like surrender. His lips lingered just enough to leave me trembling before he pulled back, his hand sliding slowly down my arm, leaving sparks in its wake. "You think you can walk into my forest without consequence," he murmured, his voice deep, edged with that dangerous softness that made my knees weak. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came, only a shiver that betrayed me. His thumb traced the curve of my lower lip as if claiming it, as if reminding me who truly held control. Then his breath was at my ear, warm and commanding. "Next time, you ask before you wander, or I'll make sure you learn the lesson twice as hard." The promise in his tone made my pulse race, and though I knew it was meant as punishment, all I could feel was the forbidden thrill running through my veins. His hand didn't leave me, it settled firmly at the small of my back, pulling me closer until my body rested against the hard lines of his chest. His scent of pine and smoke filled my senses, making it impossible to think straight. "You like testing me," he whispered, each word slow, deliberate. "But out here, you're mine." My breath caught. The world around us, trees, wind, distant birds, seemed to disappear. There was only the heat of his touch and the weight of his stare. He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes that burned with something raw and unrelenting. "Say it," he urged, the command melting into a caress, and though my voice trembled, I found myself whispering back, "Yours." The word barely formed, and yet it bound me tighter than any chain. The corner of his mouth curved, not in kindness but in triumph, as though my surrender was exactly what he'd been waiting for. His thumb brushed across my lips, lingering there before tracing down to my neck where my pulse raced wildly beneath his touch. "Good girl," he murmured, the sound low and dangerous, sending shivers down my spine. His hand slid down my arm slowly, deliberately, until his fingers laced with mine, locking me in place. I could feel the strength in his grip, unyielding yet steady, and in that moment I realized the forest wasn't just his domain, it was his rule, his law, his will, and I had stepped into it without knowing I would never truly walk out the same again. He guided me deeper between the trees, each step echoing louder in my chest than on the earth beneath us. The sunlight broke through the leaves in sharp lines, but it felt as though the forest had grown darker, quieter. Listening, his voice came close to my ear, calm yet commanding. "Out here you belong to me," and the words sank into me like roots digging into soil. I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't true, but when he stopped and turned, his eyes catching mine with that piercing, unrelenting gaze, I felt the air leave my lungs. He didn't need to raise his voice, didn't need to explain. His silence pressed heavier than words, and when he placed my hand on the rough bark of a tree, holding it there firmly with his own, I knew he was showing me there would be no escaping the weight of his presence. His grip was steady but not cruel, the coarse bark scratching lightly against my palm while his hand covered mine, anchoring me in place. He leaned closer, his breath warm on my neck, and the forest around us seemed to vanish into a blur of green shadows. I could hear my own heartbeat racing louder than the rustle of leaves. His tone was low, almost a whisper, yet it carried the force of an order. "You wanted to wander alone, but in my woods, every step is seen, every mistake remembered." His fingers traced down my arm with unhurried certainty, reminding me that he decided the pace, that he held the rhythm of this moment. I trembled not from fear but from the raw awareness that he had stripped away all the little illusions of freedom I thought I had, until there was only his nearness and the steady thrum of command in his presence. He turned me gently yet firmly, my back meeting the rough trunk of an old pine, its strength pressing through me as if the whole forest conspired with him. His eyes locked on mine, calm but unyielding, and in that gaze I felt both the weight of warning and the pull of something deeper. His hand rested at my waist, holding me in place with effortless authority, not letting me slip away. "Out here," he murmured, his voice rough like gravel yet steady, "you follow my rules." The words lingered between us, heavy, impossible to ignore, and though every instinct urged me to protest, my lips stayed silent, caught in the heat of his closeness, the air thick with pine and something dangerous. I realized he wasn't just punishing me for wandering, he was teaching me what it meant to belong to his watchful eyes. His breath brushed against my cheek warm and steady, sending shivers down my skin as his hand slid lower, tightening his grip just enough to make me gasp. The forest around us seemed to vanish, no birds, no rustling leaves, only his presence filling every corner of my world. "You thought the woods were yours to wander," he whispered, his lips so close I could almost taste the words, "but out here, you're mine to guide." My fingers curled against the bark, desperate for balance, yet his nearness left me trembling not with fear but with something I couldn't name, his body blocking the light, his shadow merging with mine until I could no longer tell where I ended and he began. His lips hovered above my ear, not touching, just close enough to make my pulse hammer wildly. "One step too far and the forest takes its payment," he murmured, and with every syllable I felt my resolve slipping, my breath catching in shallow bursts. His hand moved across my waist, firm and steady, pulling me back against him as if I belonged there all along. The roughness of his voice mixed with the scent of pine and earth until I was dizzy, unable to think of anything but the heat of him, the command in his tone, and the strange sweetness of surrendering to it. I tried to whisper something, maybe an excuse or a protest, but the words died on my lips as his fingers tilted my chin upward, forcing me to meet his gaze, his eyes dark and steady like the depths of the woods themselves, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Forgot even who I was. All that existed was the heavy silence between us, broken only by the sound of my heartbeat and his low, deliberate voice. "You knew the rules of this place," he said slowly, each word wrapping around me like a chain. "And still you chose to test them." His thumb brushed the edge of my lower lip, so lightly that it set my whole body alight, leaving me trembling, caught between fear and a dangerous longing I couldn't fight. His hand lingered at my chin before sliding down my neck, his touch firm enough to remind me that he held control yet gentle enough to make my breath catch. I wanted to look away, to protest, but instead I found myself leaning into him, as if my body had already made a choice my mind refused to admit. "You think the forest forgives disobedience," he murmured, his lips brushing so close to my ear that every syllable felt like fire. "No, it punishes, and it teaches." His words weren't just a warning, they were a promise. And though I knew I should resist, the way he looked at me made resistance feel impossible. The trees around us seemed to fade into shadows, leaving only his presence, his strength, and the unbearable tension that tied me to him tighter than any rope ever could. His thumb brushed across my lips as if testing how much defiance was left in me, and I shivered despite the warmth of the midday air. My pulse hammered in my chest louder than the whispering leaves. His voice dropped even lower, rough and steady. "You wandered where you shouldn't, and now you'll learn why the forest belongs to me." My knees felt weak, my breath shallow, and though fear curled in my stomach it was tangled with a pull I couldn't deny. He stood so close that I caught the scent of pine and smoke on him, wild and untamed. His grip tightened slightly, tilting my head back, making me face him fully. And in that moment I wasn't just a trespasser in his woods, I was his captive in every sense that mattered. I tried to steady my breath, but his gaze pinned me in place like roots holding the ground. The forest around us seemed to fade into silence, even the birds stopped singing. His hand slid down to my wrist, rough skin against mine, making me tremble as he pulled it closer to his chest. I felt the steady, commanding rhythm of his heartbeat beneath the layers of his shirt. It was both terrifying and reassuring, as if the entire forest pulsed through him. He leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. "You thought you could walk here freely, but every step you take belongs to me now." His words wrapped around me like chains, yet my body leaned forward instead of pulling away, caught in a spell I couldn't break even if I wanted to. His lips finally touched mine, firm and unyielding, yet carrying a heat that melted every last bit of resistance inside me. The forest no longer felt like a wild place but like his domain, and I was no longer a visitor but a part of it, claimed, bound, trembling yet craving more. When he pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, his low voice sealed it. "Now you understand. You're not walking these woods alone anymore, you're walking them with me." And as his hand slid down my back, I knew there was no turning away. Because my heart was already beating in time with his.